If you are joining us online, thank you so much. For those in person, we appreciate you being here at the H-GAC webinar and workshop series focused on disaster debris management. I'm going to be one of your moderators today. My name is John Burry. I'm the Director of Post-Disaster Programs with Tetra Tech. I have served local and state governments in an emergency management and disaster recovery capacity for nearly 25 years, since 2001. Have worked on planning projects here in the Houston-Galveston area region, as well as response and recovery operations. Most recently, my work has taken me to Asheville, North Carolina, following Hurricane Helene, down in Pasco County, Florida, right north of Tampa, following Hurricanes Helene and Milton. And then most recently and finally, most tragically, which has been out in Los Angeles, following the wildfire there in January of 2025. So hopefully I can bring some of this recent experience along with some of the experiences I've had here in the state of Texas to add value to this great presentation we have put together for you today. I want to turn it over next to Nick Russo. Nick, you want to do a quick introduction?
Good morning, Nick Russo. I'm a director/regional manager working out of the Texas region. My disaster-related experience goes all the way back to Hurricane Ike that hit us here in the Houston area about 16 years ago now, right? So since then, been involved in a lot of different Texas-related events and have worked in Georgia recently from Hurricane Helene and a couple of other states. So happy to be here today and hope you get something out of it and ask us questions, and we'll go from there.
And I'm Brian Rutherford. Been with the same group of people, Tetra Tech, for 17 years and been involved in a lot of different aspects of recovery. Been involved in the hurricanes here, floods here, wildfires in California. Also, before then, I was with the Galveston County Health District, where I was involved in response to different kinds of emergencies and disasters. And then before that with the state of Texas. So I've been doing a lot of emergency management and disaster work. I also do a lot of plan writing, so disaster debris management plan development and also plan updates. Done these all over the country. So I've kind of seen what goes well and what can go horribly wrong. And so we try to build all that in the plan so you have a plan of best practices. So nice to be here.
Thanks, Brian. All right, before I kick things off with today's workshop, for those of you who are online, if you wouldn't mind finding the chat box or the chat icon and just putting your organization that you're representing, your name and your organization you're representing in that. It'll help us. I can check it at one of the breaks here. The chat's at the bottom of your screen. If you wouldn't mind just putting your information in there, that'll help us, again, tie in some more thematic elements and be able to customize or tailor some of the scenarios and some of the items that we talked through today. So, but before we get, again, I think I've said this 3 times now, excuse me, before we get started, but really before we get started, I wanted to talk about this past weekend and with the floods that occurred in Central Texas. Obviously a tragic situation, and you know, I think all of us, you know, in Texas as well as worldwide have been watching what's going on, and obviously terrible tragedy for those who have been impacted. You know, but I think when it comes to debris management, this is certainly a scenario that we think about in this space. And you know, we've got an entire webinar that is going to be dedicated to flooding. We're going to spend, and that's going to be, actually it's Thursday, July 24th. That is going to be a 2-hour presentation by our team. It's going to be running from 10 to noon. You've got the information. Amanda or Wendy or Aaron Livingston, who's not here today, can provide that information to you. But we're going to be talking through many of the issues associated with flooding, and we're going to weave a lot of these in. But obviously, in the case of the Kerrville Guadalupe River flooding. You're going to have, issues with your debris stream, your mixed debris. You're going to have, the possible federal and state involvement. There's just so many things, responsibility versus capability questions that get asked. And so, obviously with search and rescue going on right now, or search and recovery going on right now, a lot of that is focused there. In the future, in the very near future, there is a lot of questions that are going to be asked about the debris operation. So obviously it's something that we've been watching all weekend and talking about. Nick, I know you got family there, and I've known some folks who are in that area too. And I'm sure it's touched a lot of folks. So we just want to acknowledge that before the regular program. So we are going to talk about some recent incidents, some lessons learned, some changes in policy. Next, we're going to move into private property debris removal. Again, this has a really heavy touch point to the recent disasters with Helene and Milton and a lot of these big disasters, and will likely impact the Guadalupe River disaster. We're going to talk about technology and AI in debris management, machine learning, artificial intelligence, and how that has been integrated, some technology components in debris management. And then we're going to wrap things up with a debris management 101. Some basic concepts that we want to make sure that we do talk about, and how some of those fundamental components, the blocking and tackling, is incredibly important for those, especially for those who haven't been through a disaster before. So I'm going to kick things off. Obviously, a very wild weather year in 2014, very active hurricane season. A lot of these disasters occurring in the central United States, as well as 5 named storms, including one here with Hurricane Beryl. Texas, no stranger to these disasters, certainly has kept folks in our industry very, very busy with disasters across the U.S. This is an interesting statistic that we pulled prior to today's presentation. FEMA has a website called FEMA Open Data, and FEMA Open Data is publicly available. And in 2024, just right now, there is 1.5, almost call it 1.5, $1.48 billion that has been associated with Category A debris removal across the nation. That's for 1 year. And I will tell you, that is a staggering amount because of the time it takes to get obligations made, but it's certainly representative of the amount of money spent on debris removal. In Texas, $143 million. A lot of that coming here in the Houston area associated with Hurricane Beryl. But as Nick will talk about and Brian will talk about, we've got other events in other part of the state of Texas this past year. But a truly staggering amount of money. You look at the billion-dollar events here in the state of Texas, we certainly have seen that rise over the last several years. We are one of the most disaster declared states, and will likely continue to see that occurring, and why, again, it's so important. When you look back at 2024, you looked at the January flooding, you had the Panhandle wildfire there, the Smokehouse Creek, you had the series of weather events, severe weather events in both April and May, and finally, in July 8th of last year, we had Hurricane Beryl. When Brian and I were talking about today's presentation, we were right here when the derecho and all the severe weather events, but Beryl had not happened yet. So what we did want to do is we did want to take a moment to get down into the Hurricane Beryl disaster and some of the key elements of it, and why and what nexus it has with debris management. Again, coming in Cat 1 at one time, a Cat 5, a moderate low death toll and power outages being a big part of that event. You remember a lot of discussion about center point and power restoration project processes. But coming on the heels of derecho, it certainly caused widespread damage and debris across the region. You know, I know, Nick, there was a lot here. You were also working up in the North Texas area, but I mean, again, for you, Hurricane Beryl, you know, what do you think of? What does it mean?
One thing to remember is that Hurricane Beryl really impacted the entire Houston-Galveston area council region. As John mentioned, landfall was in Matagorda. Honestly, I've heard from Matagorda before. They kind of feel like they were left out of the highlights, right? But it did cause damage in Matagorda. You hear a lot about, obviously, what happened in the Houston region from Beryl and Fort Bend County. I know you guys are here, Fort Bend County and the cities there, because really that's where you have the magnitude of the urban populations, right? So really just a very large inconvenience, you know, to a lot of our residences, and then obviously puts quite a bit of demand on the public agencies that have to deal with that. So
one of the interesting things is how quickly Hurricane Beryl was declared. You know, with a hurricane, you know, with that comes a little bit more news media, more hype, if you will. That does, you know, go a long way in getting the disaster declaration. I mean, you saw in, again, most recent Guadalupe County wildfire, or excuse me, not wildfire, but flood there in Kerr County, Guadalupe River. The disaster declaration occurred a day after, 2 days after, and it was for both public assistance and individual assistance for Kerr County, and that can always help things. Yeah, Nick, as you were saying, kind of the map there, the extent of damage, and you know how important that is for debris operations.
right, exactly. And another thing that I think we'd be remiss if we didn't point out is there was, well, number one, Beryl obviously came in kind of after the Houston region had almost got everything cleaned up from the derecho, right? So then here you have this instant second wave of new debris stream, and that was a kind of a problem in itself for a lot of folks in this room in Houston and Harris County. The other thing is, then we forget that there was a series of follow-on events after that, like the Temple, there was a tornado in Temple, kind of wrecked them up pretty good. It did make a federal declaration, as well as I think a tornado and straight line wind in Dallas. So those are things really, you know, people here, once you have something so imminent of a problem, then the news focuses on that, and you don't hear about, you know, similar communities that are dealing with the same thing. And the last thing I would say is, really since Beryl up until now, with what we've seen in the Hill Country, there have been quite a few of disasters in Texas that just aren't big enough, you know, to make a declaration almost. So South Texas flooding, there was another tornado down in the Corpus Christi area recently. And so, you know, what we want y'all to also remember is sometimes there's debris generating events that we all have to deal with in this room that don't, you know, they just don't bring federal resources in terms of a declaration to help you get reimbursed. But the problem is still there, and we have to address those challenges, right? So
it's a great point. And two things as we close this, look back at 2024. Number one is Hurricane Beryl was a B storm, okay? And I mentioned there was a H storm and an M storm. There was Helene and Milton. And so, and those did unfathomable amount of damage there in the Southeast United States. I will say that one of the things that are important is that not only did we have Beryl on the heels of the derecho, which, Nick, as you mentioned, we just cleaned up, and there was this fear of missiles out there, branches, or potential flooding hazards, you know, impacting the stormwater system, but then you had these two other big disasters in Helene and Milton that were drawing resources away from this area. So speed is the killer competency. That's one of the state directors in Tennessee used that as his catchphrase, and I couldn't agree with him more and how important it is. So again, as we look at the frequency and where these disasters happen, having a plan, being prepared, and executing is a big piece of this. And now we're going to switch gears here to the Public Assistance Program and Policy Guide, otherwise known as the PAPA-G. That is the kind of the industry term of the people in the know usually say it that way. It went into effect January 6th of this year. You know, mainly the same type of program and policy guide. It's, I'd say, you printed it out maybe an inch thick, maybe a little bit less than that. But there are some key things that are important. And this one, for friends at Harris County, as well as all the counties and cities, especially like the city of Bel Air here, is Category I. I is a new category work. We had A through G, okay? And I will reimburse you for floodplain management activities. Now, under PAPA-G version 4 and in the DRRA, the DURA, not a very good acronym, trying to say that, but Section 1206, this was always reimbursable. But because of the fact that now we have a category of work, so for the Houston Public Works team here, in your, the building inspections and whoever does your floodplain ordinance, really your enforcement, all of this will be reimbursed for 180 days. Okay, so a lot of communities took advantage of this during Hurricane Milton and Helene, and I think now having it codified as a category of work under Category I will really allow it to be more pronounced, and I think that's what FEMA was trying to achieve there. Next is mitigation. Mitigation under the 406 program. This Appendix J, which is again in the PAPA-G, is your automatic qualifiers, your cost-effective mitigation strategies. It provides a list. It's one of those, I don't print out a lot of paper these days, but Appendix J, I do have that printed in new version 5, just to have that. That's a standalone appendix that is really important as you look at your permanent work projects, and 2 that are focused on wildfire. There's also a language in there for the simplified procedures process. Simplified procedures policy started in COVID during the 2020 era. And now it just fast tracks things, less administrative burden, and can really help speed these projects to get them written and through the different gates. Another big area is PPDR, private property debris removal. Now removing requirements for pre-approval for things like private-owned roads and property, which we've got a whole section. We're going to really dive into that. And we're going to, hopefully tear it apart there and build it back up again. We've got the identification of orphaned roads, which is a common occurrence across the U.S. Added language about what authority that FEMA has, FEMA to reimburse, and the restricted areas, and what is in the public interest, and then it talks about approval. That is one thing that we have seen, and that's a tightrope, guys, is talking about if you are seeking FEMA reimbursement, going ahead and getting it done versus requesting the pre-approval. It has a lot on hazardous limbs and trees. You know, Nick, hazardous limbs and trees, a big challenge here. I mean, again, do you see that occurring all over the place?
Yeah, you know, the LHS program is a tough one for a lot of folks to work through, just because in the past there's been a lot of measuring requirements, photo documentation, which still exist. But what we've seen FEMA really try to do in updated Papa G, as well as some of their guidance memos, is to try to streamline and alleviate some of the documentation that's required, and that can become, you know, ambiguous in itself. So we just encourage folks to you know, perform what's in their contracts, because a lot of contract debris removal contract specifications require or tie back to a certain measurement of a tree or a hazardous limb and that sort of thing. So
I think that's a great thing to say. I think what Nick was saying without saying it is to continue regardless of what is in the Papa G, it's definitely a risk mitigation strategy to follow your contract and maintain the adequate or same amount of documentation that you would have prior to any simplified procedures associated with leaning trees, hanging limbs, and stumps.
And definitely to focus on hazards, true hazards. The LHS program isn't a beautification or tree trimming, brush removal exercise. It is there to remove true hazards to public health and safety.
Yeah, but in one area that will be simplified, and we've seen simplified, is the Environmental and Historic Preservation, or EHP. This is sometimes known as the long pole in the tent. It's the one that takes the most time for your projects. Really not a super big concern in debris outside of your debris management sites, but can be streamlined and simplified for your permanent repair projects, but is one of those things that can take a long time. So it's definitely, again, I would still encourage you, while the documentation requirements are clarified in the Papa G, to seek consultation in concert with the state, TCQ, as well as other environmental professionals. And then finally, project closeout. There is some new language in the Papa G version 5 that seeks to dedupe or deduplicate the amount of reviews, compliance reviews that are required. And so if a project is 100% complete and you're getting the work obligated, and it's done, not mostly done, not kind of done, but done, that you don't need a FEMA level review and a recipient review, you know, two separate ones that can be done at the same time, and you're not repeating things at closeout. So we'll see how this one, I think this is being incorporated into the state's administrative plans. So we're excited to help anytime you can deduplicate something. And then finally, there's a section on sheltering. I think it's important just because sheltering across the U.S. is a big challenge, not necessarily debris related, but there's a lot of information in there about non-congregate sheltering and what is eligible when you have a population that you're taking care of. So I'm going to ask Brian to go into some lithium-ion batteries for those Tesla owners or Rivian or whatever, you know, kind of vehicles that are out there.
Yeah, so I want to talk about, this is kind of a recent thing that has become an issue. I mean, you consider all the different things that have lithium-ion batteries in them now. I mean, cars, you know, a lot of vehicles, trucks. Well, then, you know, of course, you have personal devices. Then some homes have a battery pack on them, you know, to kind of carry them through during a power outage, that kind of thing. And of course, now we have different of these whole facilities that are supposed to supplement the power backup system with lithium-ion battery systems. So anyway, it was a real issue. So back a couple of years ago, when we had the Maui wildfire, y'all heard about that. It was a huge deal. And so they had to come up with a system. They had all these vehicles out there that were using lithium ion, and you can't just dispose of them easily. The problem with them is that when one of the batteries gets damaged or it gets overheated, however it gets damaged, you have this thing that happens called thermal runaway. And the chemical processes in the battery will just flame up, and it's a serious fire. You can't just put it out with water. And once one gets lit, it lights up all the others. And so it was a real problem. People didn't want to transport anything that had lithium ion batteries. So you bring in contractors, to help haul stuff away. And oh no, I'm not getting on that. So they had to come up with a system to render these batteries safe. And so this is going to be something that we have to address with future, debris operations, is how are you going to deal with these batteries? So they put together this real detailed information, the EPA did, and it's online. You can access it and get this information. But they go into a lot of detail on how they managed this and what they came up with. And EPA working with contractors, they had teams go out to identify these batteries, where they were, and came up with a system for rendering them safe. So here's what they came up with. So first of all, they had to locate them. And it sounds like it would be real easy, but if you've got a vehicle and it's just charred and a lot of it's plastic and melted, it's not necessarily that easy to identify, which ones may have batteries in them. So they had to first of all identify them. So they had experts there to help them locate where these batteries were, and if they're in a vehicle, if they're in a house, or where they were. Then they had to make sure they were not energized. So they actually had an electrician on these groups of teams that would go out to make sure it wasn't connected to anything where it was being energized. Then the only way they could figure out how to de-energize these batteries is to soak them in a brine solution, so a sodium solution. And so they collect these batteries, transport them carefully to a very close, kind of like a temporary debris management site, but just for batteries. And they put them in this brine solution for 3 days. So they had to soak for 3 days to de-energize the batteries. And then to further render them safe so they don't spark up and start a fire, is they either crushed them or they shredded them. So I know so this is also an issue in the LA fire. You consider all the people in LA that may drive an electric vehicle or something like that. And so they brought in equipment from New Jersey, I think, drove it all the way from New Jersey to actually shred these up. And in Hawaii, what they use, they just used like they just crushed them. So anyway, so what they had by then was just this material that was no longer a battery at all and was completely safe. And then they just took it and they were able to recycle the material with a metal recycler. So just something new to add on to your plate when we're talking about debris management.
Thanks, Brian. And, especially in certain areas, I had a chance to take a look at those of you who are joining remotely, and whether it is folks in the San Antonio area with the AACOG or in the Arkansas, Texas area. We saw Richardson Plano online. Thank you for joining today, along with all of you who are in the Houston-Galveston area, from El Campo to Iowa Colony to Sugar Land and across the region. I think it's super important to know that factors like lithium-ion batteries were not even a thing 10, 15 years ago, and now here we are talking about handling it as a unique debris stream. So keeping refreshed and keeping, up with some of the changes I think are always important, especially as we get into the hurricane season, which again, above normal is the forecast and the prediction, but as we saw this past weekend, it certainly could be the wind, the rain, who knows what could happen. So we're going to move into private property debris removal. I'm going to turn it over to Nick Russo. For those of you who are here, as well as for those of you who are online, we are going to take a break in about an hour, so at 10:30. So if y'all can hang tight, we're going to get through this, and we're really going to get into some really interesting information about how a government-led private property debris removal program can really help impact and solve the debris issues within your community. Nick?
All right. So private property debris removal, or also referred to as PPDR, we're going to talk about how you might be involved in this or how others in your community may be involved and what that means. So let's talk about what's in the latest PAPPG. PPDR can include the following items. So privately owned roads with unrestricted access, privately owned roads with restricted access, privately owned non-commercial property, so that would be your residential facilities, non-commercial owned property, and then finally commercial property. And we're going to go through all of these examples. I'm actually going to come back to this chart because it's a really good summary. Let's talk about privately owned roads. So private roads are those that are not owned by you, operated by, or otherwise the legal responsibility of the public entity that you may work for. Those can include orphan roads. Orphan roads are, can be roads that are really not on anyone's maintenance log or maintenance system. Then you can get into roads that are in gated communities or even owned by HOAs, homeowners associations. Privately owned roads can also have public access, right? Meaning you and I could drive down that road, but it's still owned by a non-public entity or owned privately. So if the public has unrestricted access, no locks, gates, or guards, and frequently uses the private road, then we can get into removal and disposal of that storm-related debris can be in the public interest. Then we have privately owned roads, again, but with public access. So that can include debris that's placed at the curbside, so it's coming off from private property, but also on that open access road. The applicant's generally not required to submit additional documentation demonstrating the debris removal is in the public interest, but we're going to talk about how to do that. So then we have privately owned roads that have restricted access, meaning, there is a gate, could be a fancy gate, could be just a cattle gate of some type, but it's behind a lock, gate, or guard. The private road is restricted, rarely used by the public. Then we would need to get into a situation of documenting that debris removal was in the public interest, and only FEMA has the authority to really determine whether that debris removal is eligible. Here's an example. So obviously in the greater Houston area, we see a lot of residential subdivisions that can be gated. The roads are not owned by the municipality, but rather a private entity or commonly owned by an HOA, which is a private nonprofit entity. So what we're talking about really is how to follow the FEMA guidelines to do this. Then we've got obviously privately owned non-commercial property, this being the residential sites. And we're going to talk about how to, obviously those are slower moving debris removal programs. We get into a lot of the right of entries, discussing with FEMA and having a contractor and a plan that goes through really like I said, not a fast debris removal process because you're collecting right of entries, evaluating what's on those private properties, and then getting into the actual removal. Then we've got private commercial property. These obviously are non-residential facilities. Even in the case here, you see like a high-rise condominium. This is owned by, owned by an entity that's commercial in nature. You could also have, commercial debris from businesses, both the big box type of stores as well as just small mom and pop commercial entities. And we're also going to talk about how we need to get pre-approval from FEMA prior to doing any of that debris removal work, even when it's in your, or if it comes to your municipality-owned right-of-way, and what that means. So I'm going to go back to this chart just for a second. Okay, so let's talk about the ungated private roads now that we all know what those are. Typically does not require a right of entry. It does not require a separate FEMA approval, but it's on the applicant to basically document proof that removal was in the best interest of the public health and safety. Okay, and you're going to see that word a lot. For gated communities and homeowners associations, definitely requires a right of entry. Does not require a separate approval, caveat, but FEMA strongly recommends that we get that prior approval. That debris must be, or the impact of debris must be quote unquote widespread, and the applicant must prove that removal is in the interest of public health and safety again. And we need to, or could get into addressing duplication of benefits, meaning did insurance also provide that entity, funds for the removal of that debris. So non-commercial private property, again, these are the residences that are not commercial in nature. When we get into, if you do get into a situation, again, very widespread debris event where it's in the best interest of the community to go in with a contractor and take care of removing that debris. Always need a right of entry, specifically, probably more of a focus on the indemnification, both from you, the entity, as well as that contractor who's doing the work, as well as indemnifying the federal government, who's in this case would be reimbursing the applicant for removal of that debris. Always requires prior approval from FEMA. So again, you're not just gonna decide, oh, I've got in my community, all these private properties are impacted. Let's run in there either with county or city equipment or even our contractor to start removing that debris. Must be widespread. Again, you're not gonna, well, I can't speak for FEMA, but it's very likely that you would, actually obtain an authorization and receive funding for doing PPDR on, say, 5 homes. This is going to be a very widespread situation where, lots and lots and lots of homes or residential properties are impacted. And again, must prove that removal is in the interest of public health and safety. And we have a slide that John's going to talk about in a little bit about also addressing the duplication of benefits.
And again, when you're thinking about private property, this whole idea of widespread, and that is that I got to tell you, that's not a low bar to overcome. This is something that really is not only at a micro level, which may be your city or county, but it may be looked at on a state level as well. One of the lessons learned, and again, that's why we talk about disasters from previous year at these workshops, is this became like the thing, the big topic in 2024. Now coming into 2025 are these government-sponsored private property debris programs and how beneficial it could be. But again, coming up with the idea of widespread work the state, what we did see in Hurricane Milton and Helene is FEMA came out with disaster-specific guidance, or DSG, the memos that helped.
Isn't that a shoe store?
It is not a shoe store. Very, very close. It's got that buy one get half off. But yeah, the DSG, that was something that we did see. But again, when you're going through this, it's really important to come up with the idea of how widespread the event is.
Yeah, And in those PPDR missions, just to talk about the non-commercial property, again, that's a lot of planning and thought and coordination amongst your entity.
It's months. It's months. It's not days. It's not weeks.
The community outreach.
Yeah.
This is not a fast thing. So the last thing I'll say in terms of the chart is that commercial right-of-way, okay, doesn't require a right of entry for us or collectively us to handle debris that's in the public right-of-way from commercial facilities, but always requires prior approval from FEMA. And the thing that I would refresh or share with you guys about that is, if you remember back maybe to Hurricane Harvey, okay, I remember FEMA granted the entities in this region kind of a one-time pass or one-time collection, one-time pass for commercial debris from commercial businesses. But again, it was smaller mom and pops, lower end apartment complexes. Really, we don't ever see anything where it's like we're going into a Home Depot or a big Target, big box store to clean up commercial type debris. And again, that key word is proving the removal is in the public interest. So I think we do want to talk about how you can do that. So just real quick, think back, lower end of the totem pole. If you and I can drive down that road, it's not gated, the public can access it. That's a low hanging fruit. Typically, you can go in there and remove debris. Doesn't require separate FEMA approval, and you're really not going to get a lot of scrutiny about it. When you get into the gated areas, what we're saying is FEMA saying, hey, you don't have to have approval from us, but we recommend it. So I'll use a good example of both doing that and then having that backup for the widespread and addressing the public health and safety. So I see Fort Bend in here. I'm gonna use them as an example. So getting a letter from your county judge, your county public health, or your city or county health director that says, hey, debris in this community is a threat to the public health and safety, which we all know that it is when it's in large volumes, is really good. And you can use those types of letters to save information, also give that to FEMA, also to ask FEMA and to submit those items of documentation up the chain through TDM and FEMA, and go ahead and ask. And sometimes you may just have to make this decision on your own, like, hey, we know that these residents are impacted. That's a decision you can make as to whether or not you're going to spend public funds to go in and take care of them. And the last part is the widespreadness. So going in ahead of, let's say, your county or your contractor debris removal crews to take photographs, call it a survey, identify debris removal locations, and have that basically in your files per community, along with right of entries and that sort of thing, as your documentation. And then obviously, if you go in and remove debris, you're keeping up with where it came from and where it went for final disposal. So what we have seen is those are good practices, and that's usually how, if you're going to get reimbursed in these programs, those are the steps really that FEMA is going to be looking for in terms of providing you that assistance. And we talked about these examples, right? So here's another one I would say is gated community. These photos are taken, you can drive in, kind of get an estimate of, well, how many people live in here, how many people have disaster-related debris, and what is that overall magnitude, and make some estimations from there.
When it comes to these private and gated communities, 5% of your debris, 95% of your headache. Okay, I mean that's right. Just let's just be real. Why we're talking about this is that this is an area that could be a really big pain point because of the effect and influence they have on county commissioners, city council members, those sorts of things, that they will be loud voices. So that's why we're talking about this, because it's a lot of a paralysis in should we do it, should we go, what do we need, all those sorts of things. We see that a lot, and then we see a lot of people yelling about it.
Paralysis by
Analysis, yeah. Analysis, yeah. That one. That.
And another example would be, you know, in just your community making that decision. A lot of times, what we really see is a community deciding on its own, like, hey, we're going to go in and take care of these residents, recognizing that there's a chance none of that work is going to be reimbursed. So again, just following hopefully some of the steps that we're saying are good practices will help you in the long run. Oh, now we're into duplication of benefits.
Yep. Okay. So when it comes to duplication of benefits, there is a requirement if you are seeking FEMA funds for you as the applicant to make reasonable efforts to regain or recapture the insurance associated with that property. So as a credit to FEMA for the federal share of any proceeds. I mean, again, this is like your deductible, let's say, you know, if you will. But what has happened in recent events, or historically, excuse me, is that this is just this phase of the documentation and the program has kind of gone by the wayside. There's kind of been a half-hearted try. Now we are seeing a lot more focus on this, and so, you know, now that you've gone through all of the programmatic hurdles that Nick has described, there is this expectation that you do the work, and you've done the work for Brian Rutherford, Esquire, LLC.com. And Brian, you now, we come to you and say, hey, do you have any insurance? And you say, hey, you know, we've got insurance. Well, let me take a look at it, because you've declared in your right of entry form, and we'll talk about that, that you will return any of that if you can prove it is associated with debris. So this is a flow chart here, and you know, this is not supposed to be chutes and ladders. It's actually a pretty streamlined process, but an ROE, or right of entry, is received by the property owner. And then the next phase of it is the fact that we complete the debris removal. And then at that point, there will be some outreach to the property owner and the insurer. So State Farm, Nationwide, you know, Germania, I don't know, whoever you got your insurance from. And we get a final, the government receives a final cost of debris removal. And then you make that decision point. Was there insurance for debris removal paid to the owner? And yes or no. And if they've received the payments and they can prove that they didn't use their benefit to remove their own debris, and they've used it in some way, that at that point they remit those funds to the state. And so this is a decision tree, pretty simple process to cover a duplication of benefits, but we want to highlight it because we know it is gaining momentum in you know, kind of this environment that we're in, of making sure the federal government is not overpaying for what should be the insurance responsibility. So then final piece of this is getting the word out with a private property debris removal. And we've got some great examples of some successful programs here. I have got to work with a couple of here most recently, but making sure, but the PIO piece of this, the information piece of this, is super important, because at the end of the day, you are offering a program, you're standing up that program, and making sure that people can attend. And then also on these properties, Nick, we've got the asbestos and other environmental considerations. And I know you got that, your background in environmental. You want to kind of talk about some of those site-specific environmental considerations during this program?
Yes, absolutely. Let's take asbestos and let's talk about asbestos and some contaminants, specifically with wildfires, right? So, reflecting back on wildfire in Hawaii, as well as what's gone on in California, both historically and even recently with the LA wildfires, all of those residential properties where debris removal is going to take place, really led by the government or the municipality agencies, there's a lot of in-depth environmental sampling that goes in ahead of time before the debris removal actually takes place. So we see that a lot in wildfires, particularly with asbestos, because as those structures burned, and even if it's widespread wildfire, then everything is ash and other contaminants are falling all over the place. And so there's a lot of asbestos and lead remediation that takes place during the cleanup process. I would say same thing in other disasters like tornadoes and where you have a lot of residential destruction or even some potential demolition, right? So asbestos is surveyed and then remediated ahead of demolition activities whenever you physically can do it. Obviously, if you can't, then you got to kind of assume that the entire house there is asbestos contaminated waste and take care of that separately. So again, a lot of surveys there. And let's use the example where maybe it's not a wildfire or entire property demolition, but still just going in. So as John mentioned, in this right of entry collection process, typically staff go in ahead of time, survey, by taking photos of what's on that property, all of its damages, building sort of a scope and checklist items of what a contractor then would go in and actually be responsible for removing or repairing. So again, just in the example where maybe they have some hazardous material on the property, then that obviously would be accounted for separately.
Okay, so when you come into environmental, and Nick, and I'm sitting here listening to you here, you've got your wildfire, which has the highest risk of environmental bad stuff, okay? And then it goes down from there. You're doing demo. Hey, you may have to treat everything as asbestos, but you're not doing all the testing and air monitoring and all the crazy environmental stuff as you would with the wildfire.
Right. Well, you might do some of the air monitoring and stuff depending on what's being demolished, but yeah, definitely in the wildfire programs, a lot more heavy upfront environmental surveys that we've seen historically in the U.S.
Which makes sense because the cost is more. So for I'm sitting here, and you may be here or listening over the webinar. How much does this stuff cost? All right, so wildfire, it really is consistent with the documentation requirements. The more documentation you have, generally the more expensive program you're going to have. And so when it comes to these wildfire programs, super expensive, $150,000 to $250,000 per property. That's all in. That is doing the testing, that's doing the sniffing, that's doing the disposal, the collection, the guys in marshmallow suits out there, or whatever you want to call them, the Tyvek suits that are out there, all the way down to something really, really more pedestrian that, like a demolition or a debris program where you're eliminating, tree hazards. That's a couple grand, $5,000-$10,000, something along those lines. But you are, again, costing these are highly, highly expensive programs to run. So you want to be able to get that documentation right. I think this is a big first step, is understanding your legal authority. Do you, as a government, have the legal authority to go onto private property? You worked with the community out in Georgia. Turns out they don't have the legal authority unless it results in a lien on their property. So they cannot go on to Mr. Russo's property, and Mr. Russo voluntarily signs up for the debris program. We as the local government said, hey, Mr. Russo, we'd love to help you. We're going to eliminate your outbuilding got crushed by a tree, you don't have the funds to pay for it, we'll do it on your behalf. This particular government did not have the ability to do that without going back to Mr. Russo and saying, hey, we put a second lien on your property for the amount of $30,000.
For my outhouse?
For your outhouse, yes. It's more of an outbuilding, but big tree fall hard, you know? And so what I'll say is that understanding your requirement is a really important first step. Then again, as Nick mentioned, getting the appropriate letters that will say, hey, this in fact is a public health and safety hazard from your health authority or another official. And before I get into that, but I will say that whole issue of making sure that you have the widespread, determining that is a huge factor. We worked with Harris County last year, and that is a really big bar to overcome because it is somewhat subjective from time to time as far as how you determine something's widespread. So I wanted to go into Buncombe County, North Carolina. Many of you may not have heard of Buncombe County, but it is where Asheville, North Carolina is located. Asheville's in the western part of the state. It is a beautiful area. If you haven't been to Smoky Mountains, honestly, I am so attuned to wildfires that I thought one of the mountains was on fire one morning. And then the guy working with me goes, John, you know they're called the Smoky Mountains. And it's because they look like they're smoking. 100% true. Blue Ridge Mountains there, it really is a topography much like what we saw this past weekend in Central Texas, kind of flash flood alley. And that was one of their biggest issues. Is the flash flooding that occurred from Hurricane Helene. It actually happened about 100 years ago there, but with the area that has enjoyed a tremendous population increase, it had a big impact. So they wanted to implement a right of entry program, or a PPDR program. They had almost 7,000 applicants that applied for the program countywide. They got the unincorporated area of the county, along with the several cities, to sign on to a countywide program, which is something I would encourage you to do, and had a form was put together. Here's a big hit here. They got FEMA and the state involved, and the Corps of Engineers involved to create that form. They also worked with FEMA and the state to mission assign the Corps of Engineers to help them execute the program. Because you can get all, and I think this is kind of goes without saying, but I'm going to say it anyways, is hey, you can do all the paperwork that you want with enrolling people in the program, but if you don't have a solution that can actually execute the work and remove the hazards, this kind of all for naught. So the Corps of Engineers was the participating agency to remove the debris. They have the resources and contractors, but what they said is, look, we don't know your community. We don't know the people. We don't know you. You want to enroll the people? That's on you. They didn't say it in those words, but you guys know what I mean. So what they did was they created a program. They did a lot of planning. They figured out who was going to participate and what was, who's in, who's out. Well, they wanted to let everybody in. So they created a program where both small businesses and residential businesses or residential customers could be served. They worked with FEMA to do that. They held many public information events. They put flyers up all over the county. There were frequently asked questions and flyers that would they would drop them off at businesses. They did door hangers. They did what was really important to FEMA and the state was a human touch to the program. So they said, guys, look, yes, you can do flyers and a call center and all these big things, but we just need you to do some block walking. We're going to do some old school, old-fashioned, pound the pavement, get people involved, block walking. We're like, great, let's do it. So they called it canvassing. They looked at the floodplain maps to build educated decisions about, hey, where's the worst of the worst happening? And they targeted those areas. Door hangers. They went to disaster recovery centers. They really, it truly was a comprehensive communication strategy. They looked at social media, paid radio spots. They earned media. They did community interest meetings. I got interviewed by the local NPR station to do a quick blurb on the program. It was one of the highlights of my career. It was a lot of fun to support a program like this, but they really got after it. So once you got the information out, you designed the program, man, there's going to be some headaches. And certainly one of the biggest headaches that any program of this nature encounters is verifying ownership. Who's the actual owner of the property? Nick's living there, but is he a renter? Is he one of two people? Is his property in a trust? Is it really Nick, but it's his Aunt Margaret's house, and they just have a handshake deal, but Aunt Margaret's in a nursing home with dementia right now. And we have to have Aunt Margaret's signature on that. So all those things, people dying, people selling their property halfway through. There were homeowners associations. You have to define who the authority is. In some cases, in this case, they designed the program for two witnesses that had to be there for the ROE to be valid. So, and the witnesses had to be a person, not a pet. No, but it was really a big issue here that we worked with them on. So each property was inspected prior to the property. So once you get the program, okay, so the Russo family has, again, he's got another property, another disaster, another home that was impacted, and not in this time. The impacts was a riverfront type of situation, and we have to take pictures of the process. So we got some 360 cameras. They were out there looking to check the condition, took the pictures of the hazard. So we verified that Mr. Russo is the true owner of the property. Now we have to determine whether or not he actually has eligible debris on the site. So you have to do a two-step process. In that case, we were able to use GIS to verify the rights of entry. These 360 cameras, which, again, after the break, we're going to be going into that, which is a really neat thing. We came up with a dashboard there to update the county, the state, and the feds with progress, and we have a lot of photographs and GIS linking to recovery software. So it's been a very successful program for the county, and one that they, I think, would definitely do again. In sharp contrast, we also are going to look at a private property debris removal case study from Los Angeles, California. Los Angeles had two wildfires that occurred nearly simultaneously in January of this past year, the Eaton Fire and the Palisades wildfire, each impacting nearly 5,000 structures apiece, but impacting a different set of population. You have the Palisades, which is the Malibu area, which is a very coastal area. You've got some wealthier people. You got some high-profile people. You also have the Altadena area, which is more of your regular people. Again, single-family homes, those sorts of things. But each of them impacted tremendously by these wildfires, and each needing assistance. In this program, property owners with completely destroyed properties or severely destroyed, they were the ones who were targeted for the program. And that's important because it could just be a couple of trees that caught fire and that's it. This program, its design and intent was to help those who are most impacted. And it didn't matter if you were, again, Brian Rutherford, or if you were a Hollywood movie star, you could get into the program. And that was a big piece of this. Another piece of this was condominiums and mobile home parks. Mobile homes, as you'll hear throughout this presentation, and especially the flooding presentation, are a bit of a challenge when it comes to debris removal. But we'll talk about that. In this case, on January 10th is when the wildfire started. The right of entry collection process started less than 30 days later. You guys heard me say that usually this is a month's in planning, not in the case of Los Angeles. Really pretty quickly after this, the new President Trump visited there, and he was not happy with the projections of the timeline. So they wanted to move fast. They wanted to move faster than fast, and really everybody from the federal government all the way to the state and the local government, speed was the focus. And with that, so that comes resources, and it comes a lot of everything comes with that. So debris didn't start until mid-March, so about 45 days after, which was a incredible breakneck speed. And your right of entry process is somewhat, it was dictated not only by the speed of the search and recovery operation, but with what you can do actually, like just in the field and dispatching crews. So it's what I'll say there, it's very, very operational. This one in Los Angeles, a big deal here that we don't talk a ton about is, but I'll highlight it here, is the removal of foundations, okay? Foundations are generally not something that is included in your debris removal programs, not only for, flood, but for wind events or fire events. In this case, it was allowed, and it was two things. It was the economic recovery of the community, which was the deciding factor, but moreover, in the case of a wildfire, you have such intense heat that it can compromise the integrity of the footings, the foundations, and you're having weakened concrete, which would obviously mean slower recovery during the rebuild process. Again, this just becomes incredibly important, and a term that you'll hear not only now but later is the need for specialized equipment for these programs. And in a government-sponsored PPDR program, you're going to need to work with a vendor that knows how to bring some of this specialized equipment in, not only for the health and safety of the people out there, but just actually to get the work done in a timely manner. So, you'll always see some really unique stuff and really unique techniques to address hazards like foundations. Lead-based paint and asbestos in the debris and ash was a big challenge here. Getting on the same page regarding priorities for debris removal, that is one of those things where you have a governor and Governor Newsom, you have a president and President Trump, you have your local affected leaders all looking at different priorities, getting them on the same page. And then another challenge there was the disaster recovery centers. The disaster recovery centers, those are the things that are set up after big debris events, big disasters, when the individual assistance program is engaged. You'll hear the term DRC, but it was a great place to have people sign up for the PBDR program, but it was also overwhelming because of the number of people seeking assistance. What I would say is, if you are looking at doing a private property, you're staring it down, and you're trying to figure out what's next. I think bringing that experienced team, calling places like California or in Florida or North Carolina who have done this before is a really, really beneficial element to this. Having a strong data management system or a system of record to maintain, share, and receive data from partners in response is a big piece of this. And those who are communicating with the public, making sure they're empathetic and compassionate to the situations that are out there. We have seen really an incredible response to these programs, and the success of Los Angeles County, Buncombe County, as well as many others, have been the public information elements. So more best practices include coordination with the elected officials and contractors to balance the priorities that are out there. I mentioned competing priorities and leadership. Again, another piece of this, and the public information. This is a great, let's see, this right here, a great simple ad that's out there that was on their website to keep them going. And you also had to keep people with a mindset of the road to rebuilding, that the debris program and a private property debris program is that first step into getting you to that road to rebuilding. The communities who have found the success have been an all-in approach that say, hey, this is it. We want this to be the foundational aspect of the community and getting it up and running again, because we know the sooner people can get the debris removed, the sooner they can get back to their normal life and rebuilding. Nick, I'm going to turn it over to you for the technology. Okay, why don't we take, this is actually a great spot for a break. So we're going to take a quick 10-minute break here. It is 10:12. We will do a 13-minute break, which will, 13 sounds good. Is it the 13th today? No, it's the 7th. It's almost a 15-minute break. We'll take a 15-minute break here to make it to the 5. So we will come back at 10:25. We're going to get into technology and AI and debris management operations, and then do a back to basics presentation on our on Debris 101. All right, thank you. All right, we're going to kick things off with technology in debris operations here. One of the things, technology impacting all of our lives here, but in debris management, we wanted to really focus on this because this, I was at the Texas Division of Emergency Management conference this past year, and it was two types of companies there. They were either base camp companies or technologies. It was. My favorite one was the 8-foot drone. Like, that guy was telling me they could, it had whatever, 50-pound payload, and it could get up a mountain in 10 seconds and all that stuff, tether drones, all this sort of stuff. It was fantastic. And so really that kind of inspired us to have a section that focuses on technology in debris operations. So I'm gonna turn it over to Nick to kick things off, and we go from drones all the way to AI. So, Nick.
Yes, thank you. Hey, quick shout out, because John mentioned the TDM conference. So they do a great job. If you've never been, go. Send your team up there. There's a lot to see. And as well as TDM, there's also quite a few regional conferences that folks in Texas have been doing, which are great. And this technology, and why we're talking about it to you today, is things have evolved a lot since maybe the last event you experienced, and they continue to, right? So things are getting more advanced. We're going to talk about everything from drones, ADMS or automated debris management systems, keeping track of your vehicles and assets, a lot of things, and really ending up into AI. And I know John's going to help us with AI because he's a huge fan of AI. But things have really changed a lot, right? So just think back to, hey, we talked about Hurricane Ike many years ago. All of that paperwork, all of those tickets, that was all by hand and paper. There wasn't, tablets weren't being used. Cameras at that time were very old. I don't remember what model of
Palm Pilot. I think that's what I had.
BlackBerry.
Maybe I had that Nokia, the one with the snake on it. You know, I mean, that was the only game.
Yeah, so things have really changed a lot in that industry. Let's talk about drones. Drones are unmanned aircraft systems. Over the last few years, we have seen that technology change a lot, right? I'll give you an example. Up until about, a year ago. A year ago, I bought a drone and learned how to fly it, but all you had to do was open the box, follow the instructions, turn it on. I mean, you can have an 8-year-old fly a drone now. Like, it is amazing. You don't, it's like almost flies itself, right? So, and obviously I'm
My
talking about.
kids would break it though. I will tell you.
No,
they have a gift
they can
at that.
fly it. They can
That's
fly it.
true.
They're playing Fortnite and all those things. So you don't really have to have a lot of skill to turn one on, get it in the air, and take photos of your house, right? Obviously, there's a lot of training and FAA certification you should train yourself in or get licensed, especially when in doing commercial work. But back to disaster recovery. So drones are coming very handy in a number of things. Quick surveys, rapid assessments, getting something up in the air really quickly without having to use an aircraft or a helicopter. I know, a lot of times after a major disaster, we see, hey, let's get some people up in a helicopter, media, do a tour, get eyes on the surrounding. Well, now you can do that at local levels and even more regionally with a drone that's readily available and kind of easy to carry around, get it up in the air, take some photos, good stuff. Also in debris removal operations, so just monitoring and keeping an eye on things. You see a photo in there, waterway debris removal. Doing that in areas where you have limited public access is where a drone can really come in. Taking, before and after photos, or we like to use them a lot for debris management sites, just taking progress photos, taking a look at how much debris and what the operation is doing is really handy.
Hey, if you could go back to just a basic, two critical pieces there. Number one, get your vendors to integrate drones in their program. I mean, they can do it. It should not be a lot. Have them come to you, say, hey, these are the ideas. We want to get some aerial. I love, Nick, your progress photos at the debris site. We've seen some where it's the waterway mission, this damage assessment thing. That I think that's going to continue to evolve and be a big piece of what you're going to have to do. So just, man, guys, think about this. But you're right, Nick, such a low barrier. 8-year-old is kind of the barrier to operating it. I think you're exactly right there.
Little case study here from the campfire that was several years ago in Paradise, California. Drones, you see this, you see the image here that the cars are moving. Drones can be used to analyze, traffic flows, what's going on in intersections. In this case, it was a lot of debris collection vehicles that came through this area. So that you'll see later on, there's an example of like route analysis and getting trucks or other resources from the disaster, both into and out of disaster related impacts. So again, just getting up high and getting that bird's eye view, if you will, of what's happening, both in real time, with video and looking at it on the device, as well as taking those photographs that can be used later. Drones used for, again, site assessments. John mentioned damage assessments. So we know that damage assessments and that process are extremely, extremely important right now, but we suspect that it will be even more important in the future, especially dealing with any changes in FEMA guidance or, what happens to FEMA and going through the process of local disaster impact all the way to a presidential declaration to send federal resources in. So just, quickly and as fast as you can, gathering rough estimates, windshield assessments of magnitude in your community, and then obviously getting a little more detailed as you move down the line and as you move further away from the impact of that disaster. So again, just drones and getting people out in the field are a great tool to get those snapshots and begin those conversations with not just your public, but your elected officials, and then those agencies who are coming in to bring you resources. ADMS, or automated debris monitoring systems, these are now actually everyone in the industry uses a tool like this. It's simply a method to electronically capture debris removal information that is occurring in the field, bringing it into a mapping system. Most commonly, it's an Esri, ArcGIS platform used to display the information of what's occurring in the field. And those handheld units are really increasing both efficiency in field and data processing, as well as delivering information to entities like yourself and the communities that you represent. So just like I had said when I started, this type of technology has improved, tenfold in the last few years in terms of no more paper tickets, people handwriting, hey, this truck is full, it went to this landfill, and documenting all that paper, storing all that paper. If you're a fan of 214s, you know what I mean by just paper. And so we know that the electronic and technology is rapidly eliminating paper and pens from our lives. Another example of ADMS, again, just really tracking that information, showing where debris removal activity has occurred in your community, where trucks are at, as well as in this example, you see documenting progress, passes. You hear a lot about, an entity might, let's say we have a hurricane that came through. Commonly, the public information is, hey, there will be several passes in your community. A lot of times we hear about the first pass, a second pass, and sweeps, yeah. Pass, sweep. Again, those are just crews working through their areas, picking up debris from the proper right-of-ways that you maintain and taking those on down the line. So a lot of times that pass is a truck might pick up all the debris it can in the right of way in front of someone's house. Obviously, we've talked a lot about private property debris removal, so it can't go on to private property, and it takes residents more time to push the rest of that debris or bring more debris out to your right of way. So that's really where the passes are coming from.
Let me ask you this, Nick, because this is a question I got asked last week. I was talking to one of our local government in the area. They were asking about, we want to publish a map to show everybody where the trucks are, what we completed, where they're gonna be, all those sorts of things. This technology seems like it can do it. What's your opinion of that, and would you do it?
Okay, so again, with technology is here, and we can do that, John. We can take this information and show you, John and Brian, where the truck is at your house. Your municipality may have access to that. That's commonly what we see in the ADMS systems in the industry, right? But the trick is, do you want to show the public that information? Some people, yes, that's your decision to make. Some people, no. What we typically run into is simple is good. High-level information in the affected communities is better than more detailed information. I'll give you an example. Sometimes we, in the industry, we work with communities who want, and especially public information officers, who want to tell the community when a truck is coming to Brian's house. That's a great way to cause yourself a lot more work.
Yeah, yeah, I know it is, right?
Yeah, and so to your question, John, can you do it? Yes, you can do it. Is it the best thing to do? Probably not. Unless you want to answer 1 million phone calls, receive 1 million complaints about not coming to Brian's house at noon tomorrow.
Yeah, I know. It's 4 to 6 p.m. on Tuesday. We'll be out there.
Yeah.
You can do that with a cable guy.
Yeah, cable guy's good.
Cable guy, disaster debris operation, not so good.
Scheduling an Uber pickup, good.
Good, yes, good.
Scheduling a debris truck at your house, not so good.
Right.
But we have more of that in the Debris 101 as well, so we should definitely elaborate on this. But again, back to the technology. So ADMS, tracking disposal locations, job to date, load ticket information from the project, right, and displaying that in various dashboards. Here's an example. We talked about the hazardous tree removal programs earlier. So again, using handheld devices to photograph pre-hazard conditions, post-hazard. You see a photo of the actual measurement there being taken there in the middle, and all that's being stored in these ADMS systems. City boundaries and road centerline data. This is a good one because think to the municipality or agency that you represent. What are you responsible for? If you're a county, you're probably looking at this like, okay, I got to take care of the county roads, and on this map, those are green. If you're a city, you are, well, this is a bad example. If you're federal, like state-owned road or something, then you're red, right? And so in that county example, you probably don't have the authority and you don't do maintenance on the state roads. Caveat, maybe in some circumstances you do, right? But anyway, using the ADMS to show that agency's roadway information for those contractor crews to use in terms of where they should be picking up, where they shouldn't be picking up, as well as the monitoring staff that are out in the field also looking at this information. So this is really key for those that geographic data, the GIS information that is typically pulled into the ADMS to highlight and track the responsible work areas that folks should be on. Truck locations, again, everybody wants to know where are those crews working, what area of town they are in. Hey, are we addressing, the very, 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 very important complaints that came in from the day before? In this example about this truck or this location over in Hawaii, right? So getting down to that level of detail, and for you and your entity knowing, hey, we addressed this today, and we're going to report that up the chain. Customized reporting now is very fancy. I've seen a number of various different dashboards that are being used in the industry. In the agencies you work for, you probably are using a lot of Power BI and custom reporting. So ADMS systems can feed those, both again to show your staff, your agency, even the elected officials maybe that you work for, pushing that information up the chain. There's a lot of customized reporting that can be displayed. Basically, remember just tailoring that audience. So we'll show you examples later of what are good tools to show the public based on that. Again, yes, sir.
I was going to say, I think when you do sit down with your contractors, for those local governments that are on the phone or here in person, I think when you do that preseason planning type meetings, it's really an easy thing to do to say, hey, bring some example reports. This is what we want to see. We want to have commissioner level reports. We want to have jurisdictional level reports. You can do, if you want to go, is it the next slide?
Next slide.
You can slice and dice this information any which way you want. So I mean, and this is an industry-wide capability now. And so I just want to encourage everybody to think like that, to do that when you're talking with your team and your vendors.
Right. Again, back to the technology and just advancement, I would say really after probably 2017 or Hurricane Harvey, there has been, especially in urban areas, there has been just so much emphasis on knowing what's occurring in your community, where resources are, what's being done, and pushing that information up the chain. Obviously, when you might be out in more of a rural situation where there's less of a population, and so you can, there's less demand for, like John said, hey, when is that truck coming to pick up my debris? Fleet tracking as well. So there is technology out there. Some we've seen it in the industry. One component of the ADMS is using your field personnel to basically be with a debris truck, and that location basically being used in surrogate, if you will, for the location of the truck, because you have the body, you have the person there with that truck. There's also, as you know, fleet tracking devices and GPS equipment that you can put in a truck. And so some debris contractors use that. Some agencies we've seen actually require it from their debris removal companies. And so it's there, it's out there, it already exists. It already is being used, and you can definitely incorporate it into, basically just pull that information into GIS. I'm not an IT.
No, but it's true. You should be
yeah.
able to track your fleet. You should be able to track the vehicles. I was at a SWANA conference, Texas SWANA, Solid Waste Association North America. There were 4 different vendors that had fleet tracking software, 3 different vendors that had, camera installed on a machine type thing or a vehicle. I think
that's actually a really good point to mention, is that, in this industry, the agencies really that are in the solid waste business probably more likely already are using something like this, like the cities with the trash trucks that are constantly recording not only what's in front of the trash vehicle, but also showing what the driver and all around the truck is doing. So I know we have some examples of that.
absolutely.
In the roadway maintenance environment, probably a little different. Michael, you guys taking pictures of you got cameras on your dump trucks? Probably not. No, not yet.
I can imagine. Yeah. I think. Yeah, a lot of folks are. Really?
Yeah.
Huh. Just a comment here. Insurance requiring in-cab vehicle, in-cab camera, or external facing. Really? Yeah, we've seen it both ways. On the arm, on the front, and then even internal to the cab for health and safety reasons.
Right.
And it could, sure. Yeah. No, a lot of double-edged sword when it comes to this.
Taking a lot of Uber rides lately, and almost every Uber I get into is recording, in front and in the cab. So Big Brother's always watching. Again, just a little more on fleet tracking. So using that information to look at, like we said, traffic flows, the best routes to take, right? Because in some events, some of your roadways may be impacted. They might be traveling along ways to final destinations and that sort of thing. So definitely you can use this information to analyze what the crews are doing. ADMS and road verification. So referring back to those passes and that debris removal progress that we talked about, looking back at, hey, what was collected in that neighborhood level as the progress continued, and using that to close out, like we said, if a community is going from that first pass is done, we're telling everybody we're going into the second round of debris collection and closing out, your areas or your cities or your debris zones in that fashion. Verifying ADMS capacity with your monitoring vendors. The questions that we're really bringing up here is looking at the capacity to deploy this type of system. In some disaster-related events, you need large amounts of staff to adequately supervise this. Think back to maybe in your community, how many of your own personnel that are out in the field doing damage assessments or being involved in debris removal. Secondly, what measures are taken to secure the data? We get into, thinking back to what John said about showing the public certain information. Obviously, you may want to secure people's access to that, especially in a PPDR type, debris collection environment. No, we're not going to show everybody all of Mr. Rutherford, Brian's confidential information about his private property debris removal, right? Can you integrate the information that's collected into your website? That's really important because, as we've said, everybody wants to have this information now, not in 5 minutes, not in 10 minutes, now, right now. And so a lot of people want to even real time pull that into their own dashboards or their own elected officials' viewing system or reporting structure. I'll give you an example. A lot of DOTs, Departments of Transportation, want to analyze maybe what's happening at a state level from, maybe they have multiple jurisdictions that have been impacted. We've seen that a lot. So another one, who owns this information?
Who owns it? Oh, that is, data is the gold. Data is the new currency. Data is that is what it's going to, I would highly encourage you as the buyer to own your own data. You cannot give that up. That has to be yours. I'm very passionate about it because I see the benefits long term. I have seen it over and over and over again. This data, especially from debris, helps influence and it'll help decision making a long time down the road there.
The next one is the system easy to deploy? That meaning, can we get it out into the field in a rapid fashion? Is the either phones or tablets that are going to be used to capture this information, are they already in place, or do they need to be bought, acquired, shipped, that sort of thing? And lastly, what contingency plans are in place if the system or the cell towers are down? Because as you know, going into the disaster environment, a lot of, you can almost guarantee communication will be bad, power is often non-existent, and cell towers typically are not in good shape. So communicating with people and communicating with this type of electronic platform, making sure that it's capable of running, offline until either you have that cell or Wi-Fi connection later. 360 cameras. So we've talked about this a little bit in some of the either hauling trucks or trash collection trucks. These could also be used in the field environment. I think we're going to show you some examples of that. But basically, using a camera to capture a complete panoramic view of damaged areas. I know one that I've had experience a lot is like a Matterport device. Again, it's portable, it can be set up on a tripod, takes 360 views. And that's the same type of technology that is used if you're ever looking at a house online, like on har.com, and some of those real estate photos are the full tour of the house where you can go in and continue to click and basically go see every room in the house. That's the type of photo technology that we're talking about here. So these images can be easily shared with, residents that are impacted in your community, as well as your stakeholders. Maybe that's your management, your your politicians and elected officials in your community, and basically providing clear and objective view of the situation. Also helping to document what's there and in a pre-removal state, even in a post-removal state. And I think we have Brian's going to walk us through this example.
Yeah, so we have a demonstration here of a 360 use camera. Jacob, our IT guru. Okay. So on the right hand side, what we can stop it. And so you can send, like, the nice thing about this is you can send it like to your contractor so they can get an idea of what's on the property. But let's see here. You can move this around so you can see that, oh, let's see, how long is that tree there that we've got to pull up? Okay, so you get an idea to do that. You can see how tall the trees are. You can spin this around to see the whole property. Gives you, pretty good view of everything that's around there. And so, anyway, you can so the contractors can use this information so they can get an idea of what equipment they may need when they're a little bit here. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So again, we can stop it and move things around to see the house a little bit. Get over here a little bit better here. So anyway, it's a good tool that your different ones can use that may be accessing the property to get an idea of, can they access the property? Whoops. Can they access the property? How easy it will be to access? What tools do they need once they get there? And that's it.
One thing I'd also mention just on taking photos is a really handy but even cheap tool is using, one of the apps like Solo Locate, something that displays, you can adjust them to GPS location, address information, showing where people were. So deploying that and, the folks that you might have out in the field, either doing assessments or documenting what's taking place in your community. That's just really good because if you automatically use that, then you've always got, something to go back on. Hey, where was that? Where was that, damaged area that you took a photo of? And it eliminates, needing to write it all down and keeping a log of that stuff. So qualities to look for in these cameras, obviously, image quality, how easy they are to use. Do we need to have a lot of training to, get 100 of these out in the field with the staff? And I know obviously there's everybody likes to read user manuals, but everybody also wants to just open it up and start using it, right? So just how readily can we deploy these? We're using them in harsh conditions, right, oftentimes. So how durable and weather resistance are they? Looking at cameras that could even get wet out in the elements and still be functional. Their software compatibility, making sure we can pull that data into the computers or even a GIS system. And LiDAR, thinking back to several years ago, LiDAR technology is very common to scan, and use for topographic use and understand elevations. So there obviously is LiDAR sensors that can go on cameras, also can be affixed to the drones that we were talking about, and really gain the field team, the information that they need about elevations and even maybe heights of debris piles or levels of damage at a facility. And now we're into AI and disaster recovery.
I'm presented by John GPT over here. Now, listen, AI, I think we are absolutely on the front end of this, but we we are definitely going to see this. I will be glad to say that it's probably going to take my job away from me in the debris business. And I think in 5 years, technology will replace a lot of what's going on with debris monitoring operations and oversight. I mean, I don't think that's hyperbole. You look at what it can be, the applications it can be used for, fraud detection. You were looking at massive amounts of documentation, being able to train the AI. You know, I said earlier, data's the gold, data's the currency. This right here, data and AI having a big data set to help prevent or detect fraud, I think is an incredible use case for this. Again, document analysis. Who's filled out a 214 before 213? What some of the documents that you're required, a lot of that had to be hand entered or hand typed. I think that's a huge application for AI to train everything from signatures and human handwriting to actually just amassing the data sets. Photographic analysis. LHS, that's the acronym for leaners and hangers and stumps, any of your cut work. Photographic analysis, not only to be able to identify the type of the tree. You ever have that? My wife's got that nameyourplant.com or whatever it's called, where you can take a picture of bark or a leaf and it'll tell you it's a, whatever, what's that, live oak, yeah, water oak, yeah, pecan, anything like that. I mean, that same type of thing we're using it right now over in Los Angeles with the wildfire there. Chatbots, training chatbots to help your call center staff. We have used it for call center staff, making sure that the frequently asked calls, helping our call center representatives, or doing an online chat bot, anything that has to do with the same questions being asked over and over again, being able to train the AI to answer this. I will tell you, we do performance reviews, you set goals for the year. Every one of the staff members that I have, one of their goals is become proficient in a large language model, ChatGPT, Grok, Microsoft Copilot, to make your job and make your life more efficient. Again, I have used it for actually coming up with, pictures and artist type work. I mean, it has a lot of benefits. Environmental analysis, again, being able to take anything that there's a repeatable process and large quantities of data in a short amount of time. The AI, the large language model, can be used to do that. Hurricane tracking and flood modeling, we're seeing that more and more with, Nick talked about the LiDAR. There are these satellites that are all around, the Starlink and all these other. I was researching companies that have been doing the satellite and the satellite imagery. I mean, these are not bigger than a loaf of bread up there, taking incredible resolution photographs. And so being able to make better decision making, not only about where it flooded, but what will flood, and then incorporating those into disaster scenarios for exercises, I think, again, can be some really, really beneficial use cases for the AI in recovery operations. I will also caution the overuse of the term and the fact that, again, just like everything, there's a double-edged sword. Getting wrong information from the AI is definitely something we have also seen, and we want to make sure that there is a human element to everything that we're doing. So, but I will say, just personal story here, I am looking to find new ways to make our programs run more efficient with the sheer volume of data, 10,000, 20,000, 100,000 records that you're dealing with. Yeah, so again, the LiDAR cameras, not incredibly expensive to use. I mean, 30 grand for a camera, it's not terrible. You're not going to buy a ton of these, but the Corps of Engineers is starting to look at integrating these into the truck certification processes, where this LiDAR camera, instead of me holding one end of a tape measure, Brian, you got the other end of the tape measure? Thank you. And what are you doing, Nick, on this? No, you're just right. You're supervising. Sorry, Nick's supervising here. But I'll tell you, these LiDAR cameras, they're testing them out right now. And I mean, it could go a long way to ensuring accuracy, as well as speed at which the calculations can occur.
Definitely would speed up the process. Oh, I was just saying, I mean, you're 30 minutes to sometimes an hour into certifying and documenting some of these large trucks. So
yeah, I mean, certainly, and again, there's a lot of technology that we haven't talked about. RFID as kind of the Apple Pay tap type of components for what we do. But I mean, I got to tell you, it's an evolving business. It's an evolving time. I will, again, we hope to make sure we can integrate it in every piece of our business. Oh, and then there's the automated load scanning systems. This technology has been around for a while, tested. I would say the load scanning has not taken off as quickly as I think hopefully some of the designers probably thought. And again, I think that it possibly could be a combination of cost as well as just the availability of the resource and the time it takes to construct, those sorts of things. It's one of those scanning things where you drive a truck underneath it and then it will tell you how full the truck is. And again, when it comes to adoption, everybody's adopted the smartphone ADMS. People have seen the value when you're interviewing and when you're talking to different vendors out there as local governments. Being able to have a vendor or yourselves with a ADMS system is the gold standard. A technology like this, haven't seen it out there that much. Nick, I don't know if you've seen it in some of your programs.
No,
yeah,
not yet.
Awesome. Okay, that takes us to Debris Management 101. What I would say is at this point, if you want to take a quick 5-minute break, or let's take a 5-minute break. Quick 5-minute bio break here for those of you on the phone. If you can hang tight, we appreciate you being here. It's 11:05. We'll come back at 11:10, and we'll spend the next 45 minutes or so going over some of the basics, the fundamentals of debris operations. All right, if you could please take your seats, and we're going to get back started in Debris Management 101. We're going to take the last 40 minutes or so to kind of talk about some of the fundamentals, apply some of the more technical components of what we discussed, and how it presents itself in some of the basic concepts and components of debris operations. So for that, I'm going to turn it back over to Nick and Brian to talk some of the basics.
All right, this will be our real world debris management 101. A little bit back to the basics, but spiced up with some recent activity. Okay, so first we're going to talk about just timeline of debris removal activations, right? So we've got your prepare phase, the respond phase, and the recover phase of your emergency disaster, right? So in that prepare phase, we're talking about, in the Houston area, that's where we are right now. Nothing is happening. We're not facing an imminent threat. Maybe we're having training meetings, blue sky times, just preparing for possibly an active season, right? In the respond phase is where immediately following, let's say, your hurricane impact, your no notice tornado or other severe storm impact, right? So the emergency responders are out there, like we see on the news today in Central Texas, taking emergency actions, emergency rescues, responding to critical life and safety issues at this time, right? And when they're completed with that, which could be days, could be longer than that, then typically in the emergency operations world, we move into the recovery process. And so that's typically where you see your damage assessments and debris removal activities begin. So let's talk a little bit more about preparedness and what that means. This is just showing you an old, outdated graphic from the forecast for Hurricane Beryl leading up to the July 4th weekend last year, right? And so if you all remember, at one point this thing was going to Mexico.
Holy smokes, I totally forgot.
Yeah.
I know, I'm looking at that saying, that's going to Mexico, Nick.
Yeah.
That's not a problem for me.
It was going to Mexico. Then in this graphic, you see it was coming right into the South Texas area, South Padre Island, Brownsville, all that stuff. So I'll tell you, there was a lot of the industry having conversations with them, those entities down there at that time, right? And as we moved into the holiday weekend, this storm track significantly changed. It moved basically east up the coast of Texas, and eventually, like we said before, made landfall here, graphic on the right, in Matagorda, Texas, right? And so over several days, everyone involved in that cone of uncertainty began to have these critical questions and conversations, right? Is everybody ready? We've relocated staff, positioned staff. We're moving, critical resources either into the area or out of harm's way, all those things. And for me, the shock was by the time we got to the holiday weekend, this thing had followed me all over the state of Texas and ends up in my backyard. Okay, and it's like, why? All right, but we're there nonetheless. Brian's gonna help us out here about planning.
Yeah, so one of the things to do when we're not having a disaster is to go ahead and get ready and look at your plans, make sure you have a plan in place. It's a lot easier to do all that before a disaster strikes and to start trying to pull together resources when things are crazy. So, making sure you know who's going to be doing what in a disaster. So, looking at your city, your county, your state, your jurisdiction, whatever it is, but looking at who's going to be doing what are those specific roles and responsibilities that they're going to fulfill, and then also having a good understanding of the other stakeholders, what's their roles and responsibilities going to be? The county, the state, do you have volunteer organizations who may want to play a role in this? Put them in the plan too, so you know what they're going to do. Sometimes there's some misunderstanding between solid waste, the role of solid waste, and then the debris removal contractors, who's doing what. So making sure all that's real clear in the plan. The other thing is looking at your resources that you can bring to bear. So like if you have, looking at your debris management sites that you're going to use. Nick's going to talk more about this in a little bit, but those sites you're going to temporarily store and reduce debris, where are those going to be? What are the locations for those? Potential debris recycling and disposal. So if you have all this debris generated, where's it all going to go? So having a good idea of where that could go, and maybe even talking to your landfills, your recycling partners, having that understanding ahead of time, and maybe putting it in writing of who's going to handle some of this stuff for you. And then equipment and contractors available to assist. So making sure you have a good understanding of what the contractors bring. What do you have at your disposal? Because it may take several days for the contractors to get there. And so making sure you understand, okay, we're going to have to clear the roads really quick. What do we have that we can throw out there to help push debris off the roads immediately after a disaster? So having a good understanding of that, what you can put out there right away, when the contractor's supposed to arrive, those kind of things. And then usually when we put a plan together, the first thing we do, job one, is kind of looking at, at debris estimates. what are the, usually we look at your hazard mitigation plan to identify what are the hazards that this jurisdiction is vulnerable to, and what types of debris might that generate, and how much debris might that generate. And so that's kind of the whole basis for planning. So you may have, you can get 3 million cubic yards of debris from this type of disaster. So that's what you need to plan for and look at your resources. The other thing is the priorities and strategies for clearing and collection. Looking at the FEMA requirements and everything else that you have to consider. What are those types of strategies you need to use to pick up the debris, document it so you can get reimbursed. And following that plan, I always tell people that it seems like it would be common sense. There's debris, just pick it up. But it's really not. You really have to follow the the public assistance policies and other regulations in making sure you pick up the debris in the right way and dispose of it properly. And then public information is really important. And Nick's going to talk more about that, but making sure you know who's going to speak to the public, put that information out there, provide them the instructions they need. And so the information in their plan should specify that as well. What are the tools you're going to use? Who's going to speak on behalf of the jurisdiction? And also make sure that, all the jurisdictions together that are involved in this incident are all saying the same thing, that, they're providing a consistent message. So again, that's something in your plan you want to consider. And then also, of course, failure to follow guidance can mean you won't get reimbursed. And we've seen that happen many times. So, follow the plan. Don't try to follow common sense, and you'll do better. So the other thing to look for in when you're planning before a disaster strikes is trying to get those contracts in place. It can be very difficult sometimes after a disaster to reach out. I remember after Harvey, there was been a whole lot of things going on, a lot of debris. Contractors were overextended, and so some of them wouldn't answer their phones. And so making sure you can contact those vendors and get them lined up for those pre-positioned contracts for debris removal and monitoring ahead of time puts you in a better situation to negotiate rates and get all your resources together. Even getting a secondary contract, maybe even a tertiary contract. So in case they can't respond, you got a backup in place. Do all that ahead of time.
That's a really good point that Brian mentioned is taking the time to procure those resources ahead of time, definitely much better for you. Focusing on, capability, experience, very good things, checking references. It's a lot, just think about it, a lot easier for your entity to do that, take all the right steps, do a federally compliant procurement way ahead of time versus when you're faced with disaster in your backyard. Another thing really is that Brian mentioned is, who in the organization is going to lead this effort and / be a party to it. I'll give you an example. In the industry in a lot of cities, it's common that the solid waste department or the folks that are in the trash removal business typically are involved in debris removal activities. Sometimes you go to the next community over and it's a public works department. In counties, it could be the county engineer's office, road and bridge type folks. And if you notice so far, I haven't used the word the emergency management staff or the emergency management coordinator. And so all of those people, even your elected officials, have a role in this process. And the best examples of successful projects and the best practices that we have seen out there are to have great conversations, collaborative working relationships amongst those departments, being able to pull in the resources and expertise that you need, maybe from multiple departments or that emergency manager. And the last thing I would say is definitely for emergency managers out there is being involved or helping to bring and lead that operation to the finish line. We have seen very successful projects from all of those resources on the same page and working through often difficult situations together. So again, as Brian mentioned, your annual training and pre-event coordination, just checking your contracts. If you don't have them, going out and securing those, refreshing your points of contacts. There's a lot of turnover in our industry, both in the municipal and agency staff, and making sure you always know, well, who's going to be in charge of this? What training do they need, or what types of enhanced training do they need to be able to be in a good position to do their job? Reviewing any changes in contracts, guidance. Reviewing DMS sites is a big one, and we're going to talk about what exactly that is, but looking for potential temporary debris management sites in your community, or possibly something that your agency can control if needed, is really good. A lot of our partners do this on an annual basis, and really just keeping in touch and maintaining those strong relationships.
So Nick, Brian, I'm sitting here thinking, what can you do now? What's the most important thing? And it just strikes me that something like this annual training coordination, easiest, most important thing you could do. Whether it's through a lunch, it doesn't have to be a half day, some sort of tabletop exercise, but just doing something seems like it is. Like that's it. I mean, it doesn't have to be KP, Judge George there and everybody, the heads of state and all those sorts of people there. Like it's just simple.
So simple. So let's break it down to the simplest level. If you are in this room or on this call, and you probably would be involved in this process, then ask yourself, okay, what contracts do we have? And find that thing, open it up, and go to that company, find the contact information, reach out, make sure they're still around, have a conversation. That's probably the simplest. Because
that's bare minimum. Bare minimum.
Because if you in that process realize, oh, we don't have a debris removal contract, then maybe then there you go. That's another conversation to have with your purchasing folks or the other people in your organization. And the last thing is, if you can answer the question, who on your team or who in your group would be involved or even run this type of process, ask that question. Sometimes you might pray that it's not you that they come back with the answer to, but knowing who it is or knowing what your role is, and most importantly, like I said, what team and responsibility is going to handle this is very key. So those are really 3 quick questions. The more advanced stuff is, okay, so we have a contract and our community is large and we have a really significant urban population. What would we do with all this debris if we had to manage it both internally and with external resources? So often in the industry, we use temporary debris management sites as simply a location where storm debris can go to be reduced. If it's vegetative debris, be ground up, but it's temporary in the fact that it's managing that debris prior to it going to final disposal. So you can use these both for vegetative debris and another debris stream, C&D debris or construction and demolition debris. They do all have to be permitted by the TCEQ and reviewed by the Texas Historical Commission, but those are fairly easy and simple processes to get through. The biggest challenge really is either maybe in your community you already have one, you used it before, but we know in the urban environment, land gets gobbled up, it changes hands, it becomes neighborhoods and houses. Maybe it's something you don't have before or you don't have access to anymore and that sort of thing. So in this process of annual type review, we encourage communities to think about, well, what do you have that your agency controls that you could use in a pinch? Your debris contractors are also skilled at identifying these or entering into lease agreements with private landowners when the time arises. Identifying road clearance priorities, and what does that mean? Well, what it means is that you in your community have priority roads that you know are going to go to critical facilities, the hospitals, other medical facilities, into critical residence areas, right? Getting people in and out. So getting those roads open, identifying the roads that you definitely need to be able to maintain and focus those debris push crews, and clearing assets to focus on those, but knowing those ahead of time is really good. Again, so where do those roads go? Fire stations, police stations, hospitals, nursing facilities, maybe your critical city infrastructure as well, getting those roads open. And when we say getting those roads open and that first push, it's commonly referred to as the emergency push or emergency road clearance. This is where your labor for under FEMA Category B comes into play, your time and materials, if you contracted for that type of work, if you do it with your in-house force account, labor and equipment, then you should be tracking like your time, employee time for their equipment use, as well as the hours spent for the equipment and materials that they're using, so that later on you have that information and can get reimbursed in accordance with the requirements for the use of those employees and assets. You're also doing the windshield assessments, possibly aerial assessments. We talked about the drones that can be used. And those things are really important for estimating the quantity of debris. As Brian talked about, maybe there were scenarios in your debris removal plan or scenarios that you want to come up with in the future for what is likely to occur based on the magnitude of certain types of events. And really, using those assessments to understand, well, how many residences are impacted in our community, maybe how many roads, critical bridges, that sort of thing, that are damaged or have debris. And all of that information is helpful to estimate costs of what this recovery effort may cost, and as well as estimating time and resources that are needed. So what does an activation time look like after, in that recovery scenario? So in the first 48 hours, it's a lot of developing debris cost estimates and damage assessments that would be needed to push up the chain to get a state and then federal disaster declaration. Developing operational plans for the disaster-specific issues. As some of you may know, no disaster is the same. Typically, there's a unique circumstance that highlights itself throughout the process. At least every one that I've been through. Refining health and safety plans for disaster-specific issues, and a lot of public information going out at this time. To let people know about resources in their community, what's taking place in the community, and what steps are being taken for recovery. In the next 72 hours, contractors usually bring in hauling resources. So you're beginning to certify, stage those resources, install or get up and running the automated debris management systems that we talked about. Continuing to train monitors and other personnel on guidance, debris removal processes and procedures, possibly opening up public drop-off sites as requested in your community, as well as those debris management sites, or moving things to final disposal at landfills if needed. So damage assessments, you've heard this word a lot. We're just emphasizing here what that is. Think about how fast can you do it, how fast can you deploy personnel to do initial windshield assessments, which in the early stages are very, very critical. Just getting people out in the field to observe what's happening, do life, health, and safety or welfare checks on the community. But using that information, using that data collection to help to estimate other things like number of structures that are damaged, your own agency facilities and roadways or drainage infrastructure that's damaged, calculating some of those damage and repair costs, as well as the debris stream, because As you know, debris removal costs can be very large. So anything we can do to help estimate those costs at your agency level, then your regional level, and possibly the state level, getting those up to chain really helps in the overall disaster declaration process. And all of those things, like we said, are looking every day like they're more and more important. Presidential declaration. John, you want to talk about this?
Yeah. This is definitely something that you need to keep an eye on. The disaster declaration process has not officially changed. And you can see the thresholds, the data here, $1.89 for the state and $4.72 per capita based on the 2020 census. Currently, the state of Texas threshold is about $60 million. That could, I don't know, you may have read the report. Some disaster junkies out there online who pay attention to this may have seen the reports that they want to multiply this by 7, by 4, by 7, some other figure, making it really next to impossible to get us over that threshold. Now, folks, I have to operate on the best available information that is available today. So as you know, we saw with the Kerrville disaster, it occurred very, very quickly. And, you know, again, I don't know how they got to those official calculations, but that is the calculation. And there is a process to get that to the $60 million. But again, I will say out of everything that's out there from just a basic, is there going to be federal assistance, which is the FEMA assistance, that does have at risk of changing, probably would decrease about 75% of the number of presidential disasters declarations by, you know, some rough math if they make those changes.
So deploying resources, this is a huge topic. Think about as you begin to mobilize, you know, your contractor resources or even your agency crews, where are they going to work? Where can they be staged? Like we said, where can you stockpile temporary debris at approved sites? Possibly where you could host or allow the public to bring, the residents to bring their storm debris to a collection site, commonly referred to as a public drop-off or a residential collection site. And again, just thinking where you can stage that equipment. This is a big thing. You see in the photo the number of large trucks that are coming in to begin to, number one, just set up, get situated, get certified, coordinate with amongst their contractor about where they're going to work, and really at the end of the day, where are they going to be housed and staged overnight. Those are all very important things. So having something, you know, large like this, large parking lot, or finding a big box parking lot that would allow for equipment to come in like this is really important. And as we mentioned, we talked a little bit about truck certification and even advancements in technology, but right now kind of what you see is all those vehicles have to be measured, accounted for, and certified. That involves taking measurements of all the dimensions of these pieces of equipment, establishing the amount of cubic yards of debris that they can haul. And when you get into really, as that operation continues, making sure that the vehicles, the trucks and trailers aren't modified, and making sure that, you know, nothing has been changed on a vehicle to make it be able to fit more debris than what it was certified for. Typically, all the driver information, who they're working for, is all stored electronically. Yeah. Yeah, it's common. Yes, sir. So the question was, could you pre-certify your equipment? The answer is yes. For like agency-owned force account equipment, we do work with folks who measure that, or, you know, keep track of what was certified before in the public works, you know, vehicles, and let's say, you know, recertify any new equipment that comes in.
we work with people who do that all the time. That's a good example. You can't really do it for these contractor assets because in every job, and they will move from job to job, even sometimes during a disaster. And so this process is there to satisfy all of that FEMA guidance that we talked about, and really making sure it's part of it, the QA/QC check, and making sure that nothing fraudulent is taking place on a vehicle. DMS site locations, again, used to temporarily store, manage, and reduce that debris, not a final disposal location, and they always must be permitted. These sites can become very large. You see in this example, this is a photo of a debris management site in West Houston from Hurricane Harvey. This one was right outside of the Bear Creek area off of Highway 6. And in that photo is about 500,000 cubic yards of flood debris. Obviously, you know, John mentioned we have a flood seminar that's coming up near the end of the month, but this is one example of a site that only stored flooded construction and demolition debris. Other examples, you may only have, you know, vegetation that's being ground up and reduced, so they all vary. Again, the biggest thing is they must be permitted. So in Texas, you cannot really like pre-authorize or pre-permit a DMS site like in some other states you can. The TCEQ here is that regulating entity. They have a permit application form that gets filled out and sent in. And so we're not going to go through their form on this particular workshop. But the form is pretty easy to use, and it outlines the things that need to be considered when permitting something. And a lot of those are environmental considerations, such as staying out of wetlands, staying out of the regulated floodway, and avoiding as much as you can the 100-year floodplain without local floodplain management approval. The best attributes of a site like that are they're close to the impacted area. Brian also mentioned, you know, in the planning process, like thinking about where these are, thinking about where your what your heavy debris locations might be should an event occur, and having, you know, easy ingress and exiting from those types of properties. So most contractors recommend or really want to see, you know, at least 5 acres. Obviously, the more is better, but we don't always have that luxury, especially in the urban environment. Another good example is having something that has been like previously cleared, meaning it's already been disturbed. It's an open field, or it's a something that's been impacted. Even a parking lot is better. It can be better to reduce, you know, the environmental questions, but away from sensitive receptors. So your schools, residential areas. Obviously, sometimes when everybody's impacted, you can't exactly escape. Plus, what we're saying is when you're good to the disaster area, that's good. But just in common sense, avoiding being right on top of that neighborhood or that resident who you're going to possibly inconvenience, and having an efficient layout. And that's where your contractor comes in to really manage those sites. So what's a bad site? Something small, far away, you cause a traffic nightmare, close to a neighborhood, adjacent to a vulnerable or disadvantaged community. What do we mean by that? Well, definitely not, you know, placing a debris management site right next to an older, you know, senior citizen type population purposefully, and trying to avoid those locations as much as you practically can. And the last one is important: difficult to secure or to prevent illegal dumping, because if you don't secure that site, you're going to get debris on that site that you or your contractor never brought in. Managing the site for continued operation. Here's a great example. This one was a large debris site in Fort Bend County from Hurricane Beryl. You can see the piles of vegetative debris that are stockpiled. And kind of in the bottom and on the middle, you see that brown material, which is the already reduced and ground up tree product. That material was spread during this grinding operation, used as a pad to be able to continuously operate the site in bad weather to try to minimize, shutdowns so that, even when it rained, yes, in a severe thunderstorm, your operation is going to shut down. But basically to not have a situation where, because it rained, 2 days ago, none of the trucks can get into this particular site. And obviously, what does that mean? Then that means there's no pickup in your community for a couple of days and people are mad. And plus you've got workers that then they can't work. It's just not very good. So that's what we mean by having your debris removal contractor and who's running this site really manage that and keep things open and running. So piles during extended use, you need to coordinate with the local fire marshal about debris management sites anyway. Most fire marshals' offices that we run into typically have their own requirements for some of these like mulching facilities or places that have a lot of stockpiled vegetative debris that they're composting or turning into mulch. So following their recommendation, and as that operation continues, this can go a long time, 60 to 90 days or longer. As that material dries out, you really want to have your local fire officials help, provide input and guidance to preventing and eliminating fire risk. Because like we said, you've got this material that is aging, decomposing, it's drying out, and it becomes a fire risk. And so speaking of fires, we have to be prepared for that. These piles at a site can spontaneously combust. In this example, this was construction and demolition debris. Yes, so non-vegetative debris that heated up and combusted. Photo on the right is all of that firefighting equipment and contractors having to spread things out and fight that fire because you couldn't just let this one, burn for days and days. So got to be prepared. Having, again, like your fire marshals or fire experts help provide assistance and guidance, and then making sure your contractor has, security, water trucks, and that sort of thing on site to be precautious. Public messaging. This is something we've talked a lot about today. Getting that information out to the public about what's not only occurring, but how to separate your debris. So this one here is actually, I think, the H-GAC debris separation graphic. It's really good, outlines, telling the public, hey, here's where you put your debris in the right of way, separating your vegetative from your C&D and other items, and no household trash. That's really a big one. So these collection crews cannot pick up household garbage and take that to disposal, and definitely not to a DMS site with the other items. So having these conversations, because you're going to get inquiries from the public about, hey, this contractor came, picked up some of my material, but not all of my debris, and that's typically can be the case. So this is a reality. We push information out to the community about how to do this. At the end of the day, people don't exactly follow, the information you've given them, and this is the reality. So this is not anyone's fault, not the resident's fault, not the agency's fault, not the guidance fault. It's just the reality of people recovering from a massive devastation, trying to get material, out of their house, into your right of way for pickup, and we see a mixture of things that come along with that. So public information, good examples. We talked earlier about, John brought up, being very detailed about debris collection in a community, and then alternatively sticking kind of high level. So these are good high level examples. You got a dashboard on the left that was used in Fort Bend County, just showing a heat map of where debris collection has been taking. Obviously the yellow intense colors are where the most was, and some facts. And I realize it's hard to see the numbers on the screen, but on a phone or a website, you could see that basically the totals to date. That's really good. It kind of eliminates a lot of questions and phone calls. You're telling them what's happened, and here's a map. Similarly, photo on the right happens to be a Harris County Precinct 3 example of them messaging the community on Facebook by area or zone, as you see on the map. And they use things like, hey, here's how many dump truck loads to date have been picked up. This example says, first pass of debris pickup happening now into September 24. So and this was dated in July of 2024. So using that as an example to say, hey, you're trying to alleviate the calls and the complaints and the, hey, come get my stuff from, bogging you down in your community. And those are good examples. They basically are saying, this is what we're doing now. This is going to take a while. We'll be back several times. We're doing this until September. And what you really want is, well, what you hope is that alleviates questions, concerns, and feedback back to your office. Social media, this is another one. So again, watching out for the, what do we call it now? Karens and the, what's the guy name for Tom's? But yes, you're going to get.
Todd?
Tom?
The
Karen
and Todd's. Tom's.
But you will have.
Chad.
Sorry.
Not Todd. Definitely not.
I don't mean to offend anybody with the Karen, but you get the idea. There, when we have seen the nature of the beast, right? So your agency is communicating to the public. Nowadays, it's Facebook, Twitter, websites. And when you do the Facebook and the Twitter, what do you open yourself up to? Likes and comments. And I don't think you can turn the comments off.
Can you get rid of trolls? Can you get rid of?
So what you end up with is it doesn't matter what you put out there. You're gonna get you should expect you're not gonna get a likes. You're probably gonna get a lot of comments, and very rarely is somebody gonna tell you you're doing a great job. And how you respond to that, especially in the earlier part of the process, is important. Here's an example. So again, telling people what's happening in the community and this is what you're doing and staying on that path and your plan with your team and your contractors is really good. When you deviate because Miss Sally said, you guys are terrible, and you said you were coming to her house tomorrow and you didn't show up, you're bad, you're evil, y'all are all going to jail, and you decide the next day, well, let's send 10 pieces of equipment to Miss Sally's house. Guess what you did? Well, you just made John and all his neighbors mad because now they're not over in his area. So my point is, when the people around you and your elected officials start to really try to focus on just the individual and not, like I said, the overall plan, then you end up causing a trickle-down effect of constantly responding to, in this case, Facebook chatter.
The rumors and misinformation, I think, are, again, the trolls are going to be there. The bad stuff, they're going to be there. But the misinformation, is, and again, last 10 minutes here, the misinformation, I would just say the big takeaway is watching for that. I've seen, again, so much about it with this latest Guadalupe River flood. But, I mean, some of it can be really destructive. Some of it can be heartbreaking. And it's much more than just somebody who gets a microphone and and decides to stand up there and talk.
Yep.
And I just wanted to say that we put the League City example in there. It was Facebook, and that was during Harvey. And they actually did a great job with the public information because they had the information on Facebook, all their different social media and the website. But then they also did regular interviews with the public information officer and all that, just to tell people what was going on, what to expect and all that. So that was the objective there, to say this is a good example with the League City site.
Yeah, so we're going to move ahead pretty quickly here to wrap up. But as Brian mentioned, in your planning process, maybe you divvy up your agency into zones. Here's a good example. You could have a lot of zones. You could have not a lot of zones. Really just completely up to you, but how you want to track and monitor progress across your community is really helpful. You've heard a lot about debris monitoring today, and like we said, using the technology and keeping up with those contractor resources. So this graphic just shows you those steps all the way from contractor mobilization, the truck certification part, and then into collecting all of that data that we showed you earlier in your communities, in your road right-of-ways, or maybe in the PPDR process. But the most important part is all the way to the final disposal of that material, because what will happen is you are giving this information, all of it, in a specific format, in this case to FEMA for reimbursement, and their guidance and requirements requires to know the location of where that was, the address, what type of debris, where it went for temporary disposal, final disposal, et cetera, et cetera. And so that is the purpose of using that equipment and those staff to supervise basically what is occurring in an eligible fashion, again, in your community's recovery. And doing the same thing at those disposal sites. So that's the purpose of the truck certification. That's the purpose of making those load calls and tracking everything to final disposal. Again, looking back or reflecting on what your contractor actually, what requirements are in there, how those pay items are, and that's just part of the process. So in closing out, by now, hopefully all your storm debris is picked up in your community. When you're closing out these sites, you're monitoring and tracking all that final disposal to, again, authorized facilities. They have to be permitted. It can't be your brother-in-law's back pasture with a hole in the ground. They've all got to go to very permitted facilities, demobilizing equipment, preparing closeout reports, oftentimes doing soil sampling to confirm that there's no contamination on the temporary site, and returning things to pre-existing condition. And one thing that I would say is the most common question that we see FEMA talk about in a project kickoff meeting are those environmental requirements. When debris comes up, it's often the first question is, so how are you removing debris and where did it go? And are there any environmental issues? So, you doing this the right way and keeping track of all that documentation helps to easily answer those questions. Household hazardous waste is another waste stream that, really is, the approach can be storm dependent, having those folks bring it to either a neighborhood collection or regional collection, door to door, or maybe you have a permanent facility that you can, notify the public to bring their material out. The hazardous tree removal, we've talked about this in terms of what that is. You're really just focusing on the hazards, making sure that eligible or very hazardous limbs and trees are the priority here, and not into any type of, hey, we need to trim up this row of trees here because the maintenance crew really wants to be able to mow easier. So to wrap up, really, what are the biggest, John asked earlier, what are the easiest things we can do? Just focus right now while you have the time on preparation, your contracts, your resources, making sure if you don't have them already, do a procurement that's federally compliant, understanding guidance, going to training like you did today, looking at your DMS sites and proper documentation. And like we've said throughout the process here, we're into really just some new areas of emphasis, monitoring for any changes in guidance and FEMA changes. So with that, I think we're ready. Any questions or did
Yeah, do we have any, Amanda, do we have any online questions or anybody here with the last couple of minutes to, I know I am standing between you and lunch. Yeah, Todd. You have to turn it on though.
Push the button.
Would you recommend, say like the entity have a meeting with your debris monitoring service and your debris collection contractor?
Yeah, that's pretty typical. Yeah.
Just before the season starts, just to kind of go over some things,
Right.
look at things?
Right. That's fairly standard. So yeah, reach out to your your folks. And
I think teams or in person, just something to get the dialogue going. I think if that's the one thing, again, it can be as elaborate as a big day-long training, or we've seen just a quick Teams call. I would definitely think that doing something like that, 30 minutes an hour, is a really, really high impact, low effort thing to do. All right, thank you for the questions. Nothing online. Thank you all for being here today. We appreciate. Thank you, H-GAC, for putting this on. Yep.